and welcome to the GPS Podcast. I'm Joe Bavanese.
I'm Ernie Schmidt.
And I'm Ken Ury. This is where you'll hear about group practice success and what it takes to get there.
If you own a psychotherapy group practice and want to serve more people, make more money, and work less hours, we can help you navigate the journey and enjoy the ride.
Hi, everyone. Joe Bavanese here with the next edition of the Group Practice Success Podcast. Today, we have a very fascinating topic, the inner game of group practice. And as always, I'm joined by Ernie and Ken, and we're going to talk about our own personal journey on the inner game of how we've managed all the emotions, the ups and downs, the roller coasters of dealing with fears, anxieties, visions, goals, and all the good and bad things that happen in running a very complex group practice. So Ken, what's been your experience? You've had quite a journey from a solo practice to this really huge group practice that's thriving in a very competitive market. What's your inner game been like?
Well, that's such a huge part of the journey. We certainly have the outward results of seeing the growth of what happens over the years, as you guys know. But so much of the process is what happens through us and as us as group practice owners. And it's a process of really not only building the group and the business, but really who we're becoming in the process. And I remember early on when I was doing my initial build out, how many fears I had. And I shared those with you guys about all the disastrous things I thought, might happen to me personally and professionally as I took this leap. But the inner knowing and the deeper knowing I had was that this was going to work out. And once I came to that, I had this notion of not only all the obsessive thoughts about what if it doesn't work, but I had increasing thoughts about, well, what if it works? What if it goes well? What if I'm successful? And there was also this real transformative time when I became to realize that the risk of taking the leap was actually less of a risk than staying where I was at.
Yeah, that was
in
cool.
That comfort zone, in that mediocrity, in that, wherever I was in my career at that time, which was good. It was good enough at that time, but it wasn't where I wanted to be into the future. And so taking the leap, as I saw, actually didn't seem quite as risky as just seeing what would feel like professional stagnation for me at the time. So it's really that inner game that really turned the wheels enough for me to move forward and just think through it differently so I could take those steps.
So that sounds just like the quote by Aeneas Nin, and the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom. That's what it reminds me.
I love that. I love that. Yeah.
I remember how inspiring your story was, Ken. I mean, it was just that the what if, presentation was just such an awesome gift. And, not only just our own personal stories, but I think just the more we talk with group practice owners, how much we realize just the inner game is everything. I mean, it's, there's technical skills, there's knowledge, and, those are important. And we study those things, endlessly too. But the inner game stuff it's got to be like 80% of this. It's just how do you continue to sort of stay on point with these different things you're thrown? And anybody that's done a group practice knows exactly what we're talking about. That you get thrown these curveballs that they may seem like nothing, but emotionally they'll take you through this massive roller coaster. So I'm just super excited that we're talking about it. I mean, I think Ken, before we started, you mentioned we should do a bunch of podcasts on this topic because it is kind of an endless concept. But I'm excited about it. One, I had a little quote here too I wanted to read because it makes me think of what you were saying about the what if stuff. But I think about when we think about inner game, what kind of questions can we ask ourselves or little quotes we can sort of say to ourselves to continue to kind of inspire us. And so I had posted this to you guys, I think a few months back, but it's like the magic wand quote. And it's saying, let's say you could wave a magic wand and just like that, no matter what you journeyed out to do in your business, you couldn't fail. What projects and new experiences would you say yes to? What would you do if you couldn't fail? Mm-hmm. What would a wildly successful year look like for you? So that was something I found kind of around January 1st. And I don't know what I'm going to do with that quote, but I just love how it just opens up these possibilities and it's exciting, but it's scary because things can fail. So,
yeah.
Right. It opens up possibility thinking, which is so much more exciting and expansive and helps move us forward rather than the fear thoughts that keep us where we are. Right.
But the question I have for you guys is how do you deal with the fear thoughts? How do you deal with the fact that it's scary when you have to make these leaps or when one of your therapists leaves with 20 clients and your bottom line just takes a nosedive? Like, how do you do it cognitively? Do you do it emotionally? What's the technique on the inner game?
Gosh, I would say refer back to our previous podcast on tracking.
But how does that help? How does that help?
Well, I mean, I'm a cognitive therapist, but I feel like a pretty practical guy. And so a lot of it's really tracking the evidence. And so for me, it is looking at the numbers and tracking. And it sounds so rigid and scientific, but it really is emotional too. That if you can see some hard data, it really does help kind of correct some of that emotional fear. I think it's funny, I had a really big event this past weekend for my entire staff, and I said a few words, and one thing I was saying to them is just how much personal growth I've had to go through to run this damn thing. And I think I kind of said, I've almost become like a master when it comes to these curveballs we get thrown, even though I still freak out. I freak out way less than I did in the past. And I think it's just, we can tolerate the fear better, or we just don't, I don't know, we get practice at it, so we don't react as quickly. Mm-hmm. I lean on you guys when I do really freak out too. So there's the support piece. I don't know. Ken, do you have any, nothing comes to my mind in terms of what I do, but I'm just trying to be thoughtful about it.
Yeah, I suppose there's a lot of things that we all do that keep us more steady through some of these curveballs that we're thrown. I think about when an issue comes up, is there an alternative perspective I can take about this in this now moment? Can I see it from another direction? Can I see, a silver lining here? Can I see something that I will learn from it? Or I see it from a sort of a deeper perspective. Like when you think about the ocean, all the waves on top, and there may be a lot of turbulence, but you go deeper into the ocean and it has more of that calm feeling there. So I think, what's the deeper meaning that I can learn from this experience right now? What can I learn for myself about it? And what do I really know about how in the past, when there's been difficulties like this, that I've gotten through them and I've continued to grow and thrive and be okay. Yeah. And I also think into the future, how big of a deal is this going to be in 5 years from now? And I look back, right? If I were to look back at this, and that helps sort of calm me down. It doesn't tell me to stop worrying about it, because if I tell myself just to calm down, then that doesn't work very well. But that perspective, I just give myself perspective, 5 years from now, how big a deal is this going to be? Because you know what, by that time, that thing is going to be solved, and we'll be on to another higher quality problem at that point, because of our growth. So just taking that shift in perspective is helpful.
I just thought of something. So as you were talking, one thing I do for sure, and I've done this my entire group practice career, but my entire life as a cognitive therapist, I write my fears down, and I've even read them back to you guys, and I'll put them in my little bedside table, my little notepad, and I'll write down my fears about I had to let someone go. And so I had to write down all my fears kind of before I did it. And I really believed many of those could come true, but I still kind of knew I had to act. And then I go back and review my fears later, and I get to laugh at them, because most of them, they say 85% of your fears don't come true. Mm-hmm. And so it's so cool to actually see that in real life, that these fears don't come true. And you really do begin to learn that those fears don't come true. And that gives you more confidence when you're fearing things in the future. The other thought I just had, we all three just read a bunch of quotes, and we do that. I have a little thing at home where I have my quotes on my board, or I have a vision board about my goals. And we do that all the time in our group. So I think that's another way that we have this kind of prevention system, where we constantly are trying to push our minds to think big, take risks, but be thoughtful. I think, Joe, you're always great about, we're not just taking crazy risks. These are very intelligent risks, but we have to learn to kind of cope with the crazy fears as well.
I realized too, I've been practicing meditation for a long time. And sometimes when I feel like I'm having what may be an irrational fear, at a certain point in my group practice, I'll do a longer meditation than normal. And I find that gets me in touch with more of an intuitive, bodily felt sense of what's the right decision, but outside of the chatter of my mind and all of the noise in my mind, because I find that just kind of gets in the way, because that's usually fear-based and it's not really reality-based. And that, along with what you said, looking at the numbers, gives me reassurance that I can move forward with whatever the decision is. So that's what I find.
Yeah. I think, moving outside, certainly our thinking can really help us and shifts in our thinking, but I think doing something in our bodies and our energy can really make that change. I know for me, having a regular time to reset my body, my thinking, my emotion, and I just do that with exercise in the morning. That's what works for me. That's the first thing I do, is I head to the gym and I work out. And rarely is there a time when I'm working out that I'm stressed about an issue at work. There may be an issue that I'm thinking about, but I don't have the level of stress that I would have otherwise, because I'm exercising it out. Actually, I typically end my exercise routine with a sauna too. And I'm never stressed in the sauna because there's something, like you were saying, Joe, with meditation. It's a similar kind of thing that takes you sort of to a different place energetically. And I have ideas drop in that environment that I really don't in other times in my life, because I don't know if it's the heat factor, I suppose. And so it accesses a part of my thinking and emotion that I wouldn't otherwise. And I'm able to, again, come at the problem from a different perspective. So I think those other approaches that are non-cognitive are very helpful as well.
Yeah, and that's Tony Robbins' idea of changing your state. Mm-hmm. And we're both talking about changing our inner state leads to accessing different parts of our brain, our creativity, our intuition, decisions.
Yeah. There's probably a lot of things that we do that we don't even realize that we do for inner game stuff that we're probably just hopefully kind of talented at and that we can't even really speak to, but maybe just like our day-to-day structure, or that, I know that I'm pretty good with my sleep and also making sure I get out and have fun. So there's other things that you should talk about the gym, like, now I'm getting better with like weight loss, things like that. So I'm sure that has a thing with my inner game as well. But it's interesting to think about all the different stuff that adds to that.
Yeah, I want to bring up the topic of money because I've experienced a lot of inner game stuff about prosperity. My family of origin was two parents who were from the Depression era. My father grew up in a very poor family with 11 siblings. He had to quit school in 8th grade just to help support his family. So I grew up with a lot of messages from my family about people who made money were selfish and greedy, and that the good people of the world were poor, things like that. So one of the things I experienced as my revenue started going higher and higher, I felt really uncomfortable, and I had to deal with that. Like, could I allow myself to make more money? Could I allow myself to hire staff that made less money than me? And that was a big part of my inner game, was through therapy, and also EFT tapping helped me a lot to dissolve those limiting fears and beliefs that I had about prosperity consciousness.
Yeah. And just thinking about how that is like for inner game, Joe, is that what you're...
Yeah, because clearly I was going to sabotage my success if I didn't deal with that. It was clear that I felt tremendous anxiety. Like if I got above, I think it was 300,000 revenue, which now seems kind of funny, but back then it seemed like $10 million. And as I got to that amount, it just felt really uncomfortable. And that's when I, started working very directly on dissolving those limiting beliefs and understanding how my family of origin contributed to that.
Yeah. How would you say you see it now? I'm just curious, like what the shift was for you. Like, I seen that you got the shift, but what's your perspective now on it?
I mean, now I feel like I can make any amount of money and feel comfortable with it. Now I see that the more money you make, the more helpful you can be in the world. Rather than seeing people who are rich as being greedy and selfish, like my father taught me, I see it the opposite, that I see the people that have the most income tend to be the most generous, the most philanthropic, people that can do the most good in the world. So I see it completely 180 degrees opposite.
That's awesome.
Particularly with this model and this group practice structure, it's one that I just firmly believe it must be based on a win-win-win structure where the clients win by receiving excellent services from our providers and our administrative support staff win in big ways and better all the time as we get better at, building an excellent place for them to work. And they win. And then of course the business wins in order to provide for the therapist, the admin support, and the client. Those all need to grow exponentially together and synergetically together. And then, if you can't have any one of those impoverished in order to be successful in group practice, we must have our clients increasingly flourishing, our staff increasingly flourishing, and the business increasingly flourishing as well. And so there's no amount of poverty that could make us more successful as a group practice. I mean, if you kind of that thought further, how poor do you need to be in order to resolve the guilt that you have about being successful? It doesn't hold up to sort of a rational approach to growth and win for everyone involved.
That was the angle I was going to go. It's like identical what you said, Ken. Like that it is like the epitome of success. And I think a lot of corporations maybe don't do it this way, but I think we're realizing, well, of course. I mean, it just makes common sense. Like if you provide the best service for your therapist, for your clients, the business will thrive more. It's not a competing interest. Mm-hmm. So I love that. And I think it's just so accurate. If you do this well, I mean, everybody's happy and it's great. And if you don't do it well, your business will not succeed. It will fail by something where you won't have therapists that want to work for you. Your clients won't be happy, or you'll be miserable if you don't pay yourself enough. So,
yes.
But it's funny. I never would have guessed that I had a difficult mindset around money, like you're bringing up, Joe. But I've run into it too. I mean, even though I grew up in a more wealthy family, we didn't have like those kind of messages. I still had this like guilt around it. And as I've been gaining more revenue and the practice is growing, I've struggled more with that. Probably haven't mentioned that to you guys, but it's kind of been coming up. And I've just been seeing myself really embracing this idea that this is totally like in line with my values and ethics to run the best practice for everybody involved and all the shareholders. And I think of me as like, I have all these clients now. My clients, my therapists are my clients, I'm my client, my family's my client. Like I'm just trying to please everybody. And it's a cool thing, but it's an interesting, I bet you a lot of us out there struggle with the money piece. And
well, I think there's an inherent conflict in psychotherapy training between service and abundance and prosperity, like especially in the social work field.
Yeah.
That are, well, you have the background.
Yeah.
But I've coached so many therapists who say, I feel so guilty. I'm supposed to give away my services. I'm supposed to be poor, and how many people make jokes about therapists are poor. And so it's interesting, not only, my family of origin, but in our psychotherapy training.
Definitely.
Get the same kind of, I remember when I first started doing presentations at the Psychotherapy Networker, Rich Simon used to constantly, I talked to him every year about my presentation, and he'd say, so how many yachts did you buy this year? Like he was like you shouldn't be making this much money. There's something wrong with that, So it's kind of funny. Well, we looks like we're about at the end of our time. Any final thoughts you guys want to say? And like, there's obviously a lot more we can say about this. We probably will in another podcast.
There's a lot more.
Right. I just think about everything that we need to rise to in our thinking and our approach to the difficulties that come our way. I mean, there's a lot more. So we need to continue this conversation, guys, because there's a lot more to unpack here.
Don't you guys feel like by running this, we have to personally grow maybe more than anything else we've ever done?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Group practice pushes your buttons more than anything I've ever done, even more than having kids or being married.
Yeah, or being a therapist. I mean, I thought being a therapist or being a father would push me. It's like, man, this blows it away.
Right. When you think about the sleepless nights that the three of us have had, and then collectively with our mastermind groups and, with the stories that we hear of just the wrenching pain that is caused by some of the difficulties. When you think about like a really bad and likely, well, oftentimes, let's say unfounded Yelp review or something like that can just turn your world upside down. It's just one other person's opinion about something that may or may not have happened at your practice, and they post it to the world, and it makes, the initial reaction is it makes you feel terrible inside.
Yeah.
But that's just an opportunity for growth because we clearly have buttons that are being pushed by it, right? And so we have to have some sort of process, some sort of inner game that can rise above that and press us forward. I love what our friend Roseanne said recently. She said the amount of pain an issue causes is not an indicator of the level of disaster it will cause the practice. Isn't that good? So it's like breaking out that distinction. What I'm feeling right now, even though I feel like it's a disaster, it is not an indicator about the direction that this practice is going to go. We're going to continue to build and grow beyond any temporary shortfall or setback that we're going to have.
Yeah.
And that's what we see with all our buddies who are doing this, right? As we put good structures and systems in place, we are rising above and every sort of bump in the road as we continue to flourish and not letting those things hold us back. So we need to remind ourselves in our inner game that is what's happening so that we aren't as caught up with those regular things that can throw us a curve.
Yeah.
I also think I was just realizing self-talk is another strategy that I use. Sometimes I'll say, what if it works, from my friend Ken.
Yeah.
That one, I'll say, everything's okay. This is going to be fine. And I find it's very soothing and calming, to say that and stay on track. But whatever, I think the point is there's a lot of different ways to play the inner game successfully. And hopefully today we've given a few pointers, strategies that you can use. And hopefully we can expand upon this in the future.